can I empower my inner source to give me strength, self-confidence, and peace wherever I am, and not look to others to feel loved, important, and enough? It's not so much about empowering your inner source, so much as simply creating the space for it. The inner source is fully empowered. The inner source is there. It's like saying, how do I empower Ganga to irrigate my fields, to irrigate my farms, to irrigate my life? Well, you don't have to empower Ganga. Ganga's there, Ganga's flowing. But if you've created a wall in front of your property, particularly a very high wall or wide wall, it would keep the flow of Ganga out. So the question then would become not, how do I empower Ganga to flow, but simply, how do I remove the wall that I've built so that the river can flow? And that's really the situation with our inner source. That flow is on, that power is on. That sense of wholeness, fullness, completion is on fully. It's there all the time. It is who you are. The problem is what we've done is we've built this wall between our awareness and that existence. And that wall is called ego. So we've built that. That's what the ego does, is it separates us from ourself. It separates us from the truth of who we are. That fullness, that wholeness, that infinite nature, the consciousness. Because what the ego does is it gives you a title. It gives you a role. It gives you some way of understanding yourself that's very small. Oh, you're American. Oh, you're British. Oh, you're Indian. Oh, you're Christian. Oh, you're Hindu. Oh, you're rich. Oh, you're poor. Oh, you're the CEO. Oh, you're the secretary. Oh, you're the guy in the parking garage. Oh, this is how the ego works. It gives us something. But what it gives us is so small and so separate. And as we spend the years of our life identifying as that and reinforcing it, we get more and more stuck. I'm the American, I'm the Indian, I'm the Christian, I'm the Muslim, I'm the rich one, I'm the parking attendant. And those walls just get higher and higher and wider. So the answer becomes, again, no need to empower that which already is. No need to empower the sun to shine. We just have to open our curtains. Go outside. No need to empower Ganga to flow. We just have to remove the walls. And in the same way, there's no need to empower yourself. You're empowered. That power is there. All that is keeping you from living in that power is your own ego and your own identification that says, I'm the guy in the parking garage. I'm the one who's not good enough. Or the flip side. Because interestingly, the ego, when it's on the arrogant end of the spectrum, the I'm the CEO rather than I'm the parking attendant, is actually just as much of a problem. The wall is just as high, just as wide, just as thick. And it keeps that flow of the river out just as much. Whether it's saying, you're American, you're Indian, you're British, you're rich, you're poor, you're successful, you're a failure. As long as it's giving you an identity, whether a great identity or whether a not so great identity, it's boxing you in. And so we have to actually empower our awareness, empower our attention to be looking at fullness rather than looking at halfness or less than halfness. Empower our attention to be looking at source, looking at content rather than form, looking at essence rather than form, looking at fullness, wholeness, truth. That's an empowerment, though, of our awareness, of our attention, of our focus. It's the same thing like saying, okay, the sun is shining. Am I going to stay behind the curtains, stay in the one room in my house that has no windows? Or am I going to go outside? In that case, it's my legs that have to be empowered, literally, to just stand up and walk out. Or my arms to open the curtains. Not the sun. The sun is already empowered. And who you are, your source, your core, your soul, your spirit, your essence, your consciousness, whatever words you use, you are already empowered. But you don't know it because you're not turning enough attention to it. And that's what we need to do, is empower our attention to be looking at that. To be prepared to let go of the fear in ourselves of who would I be if I weren't this identity. Because as ironic as it sounds, even though the identity is that which boxes us up, it's what we know, it feels familiar, and a lot of us are very, very stuck in that because we're afraid of who we'd be if we were free. What does that mean about me? If I'm not really the victim of my upbringing, if I'm not really the victim of my mother and father, if I'm not the victim of my socioeconomic status or my color or my religion or the region of the world I come from, if I'm not a victim of that, if I'm not a victim of my genes, well then what excuse do I have for not stepping up to the plate of my life? And that's scary for a lot of us. And it's not an outer plate, it's an inner plate. I mean, sometimes it manifests in an outer sort of way, but it's not about stepping up to being the president of the company or stepping up to being the king of the world. It's about stepping up to living within yourself as who you really are, rather than living stuck, rather than living identifying as the victim, rather than living by what your shortcomings are, rather than excusing yourself every 5 minutes of, oh, well, I'm just like that because my parents did this, my grandparents did that, my teachers did this, my next door neighbors did that, the neighborhood I came in was like this, the community I grew up in was like that. This all gives us a history, yes. And it's beautiful on some level. It's always nice to know where you come from. It's nice to know what, this life is built up of. What are the building blocks? It's the stuff that introspection is made of. It's the stuff that when you connect with someone, well, okay, so my childhood, your childhood, my fears, your fears. This is, it's how we get close to people. But it's this much true of who you are. It's the most superficial layer, or just right below the most superficial layer of how tall you are, what you weigh, what the color of your skin is, where you're from, how much you make. It's a layer beneath that, but barely. And nothing wrong with it. It's also a beautiful layer. It's beautiful to share, to open up, to be vulnerable with each other. Okay, here's what happened to me. Here's my shortcomings. Here's my fears. But not to identify as that of who you are. Not to get stuck in that layer. Because what's down below is really who we are. And living there is the truth. I remember the very, very first time that I ever snorkeled. And we were in Mexico, and I was a teenager, and the resort we were staying at had these, different activities, and one of the activities was you could go snorkeling. Another activity was you could go scuba diving. They had so many different activities, and I went snorkeling and came back, and I remember sitting at dinner that night, and I had made a bunch of friends in the resort and telling everybody about how beautiful snorkeling it had been, and everybody knows what snorkeling is, right? Raise your hand if you don't know what snorkeling is. I'm happy to explain it. I realize it may be a sort of cultural thing. Don't worry. What snorkeling is we don't have an ocean here, so it's not so common. What snorkeling is when you go into the ocean, and they give you a mask, and they give you a long tube about yay high. One end of it goes in your mouth, the other end sticks up outside the water, so that you can actually, with the mask, see in the water, so you can see all the life in the water. And because the tube goes up, you don't have to keep picking your head up to get air. You can actually kind of swim along the surface of the ocean and see all the beautiful life that lives under the ocean. And there's certain parts of the world, many of them off the different coasts of America and Mexico, where the water is very, very clear, and you can see beautiful, beautiful life under the water. So I did that the first time and came back and was telling everyone, oh, it was so beautiful. You should see the fish and the coral and this. And they said, oh, that's nothing. You need to scuba dive. Now, scuba diving is, you don't have a tube yay high. You go hundreds of feet down into the water with actually an oxygen tank on you. I've never done it. I'm not quite that adventurous. That's exactly where the line of my adventure splits, right somewhere between snorkeling and scuba diving. But the teaching of that and that memory stayed with me, and as I've had the great blessing to live a spiritual life for so long, I've realized, oh, it's the same thing. The deeper you go, the more beautiful it is. And if you've only seen the surface of the ocean, like my mom, I could barely even get her to agree to go snorkeling. because it takes you a little bit away from shore, and you got to go out. And so if you've never been that far out, if you've only seen the ocean from the surface, it also looks beautiful. But the minute you get a mask and you can actually see down, it's extraordinary. But that's still only the most superficial level. It's, about 1.5 feet deep, as long as the tube goes from your mouth up. Those who have been scuba diving will tell you snorkeling is nothing. That the real life, the real beauty of the ocean is hundreds of feet down. And the same is true spiritually. Most of us live our lives literally just seeing it from the top down. Just the form. This is who I am. I'm so big, I'm so old, I'm this color, I'm that color, I live here. This is what I do, this is what I look like, this is my career. It's like looking at the top of the ocean. Some of us get a little bit deeper. Some insight, some introspection, bit of meditation. You start to go a little bit deeper. Okay. Fears, desires, longing, my ego, my patterns, my sanskaras. Go a little bit deep. Whether you've gotten in there through psychology, whether you've gotten in there through spirituality. And a lot of us think, all right, this is it. This is it. Yeah, I know who I am. But those who have really gone down come back and tell us, oh, no. See, that's still not who you are. Who you are is the self. Just as you're not the body, you're also not the thoughts, you're also not the desires, you're also not the ego, you're also not the history. You're not any of that. You are the depth. So it takes simply the attention, the intention, to keep diving down. And then just as the ocean opens itself to you, so does the self open itself up. But you have to just be prepared to go down. Be prepared to let go of the view from just the surface. And all the power is already there.